The night before our wedding, my fiancé held a bachelor party and spent it with his old flame. I didn't cry or make a scene. I simply put on my wedding dress and showed up at the wedding as planned. Except, at the ceremony, I gave the ring to another man. Merlin thought I was just acting out of spite. So, to provoke me into returning, he flaunted his affection with a young, beautiful woman. He called me and said, "If you come back now, it's not too late. I'll break up with her." But over the phone, I heard Norton, Merlin's arch-rival, cut in impatiently. "Linda's carrying my child. Don't bother her." I stood on the stage in my extravagant wedding dress, hand in hand with Merlin. The officiant held the rings and began to read the vows. "Mr. Merlin, do you take Miss Linda to be your wife, for better or—" "I do." Merlin interrupted, his hand tightly gripping mine. Into the microphone, he proclaimed loudly, "I do, Linda. I do." The audience applauded, but he hadn't noticed that his excitement had rubbed the makeup off his collar, revealing a clear red mark on his neck. I forced a small smile and said nothing. Then the officiant turned to me. "Miss Linda, do you take Mr. Merlin to be your husband, for better or—" "I don't," I cut in, stopping him mid-sentence. Merlin looked at me, confused. "Linda, what are you saying?" I said, "I don't." "Stop fooling around," he hissed as murmurs spread among the crowd. His expression darkened, and he slipped the ring onto my finger without waiting. He held out his hand to me, signaling me to put the ring on him as well. "Let's get this over with. Isn't this what you've been waiting for?" I had been waiting for this day, until last night. At his so-called bachelor party, Merlin had kissed his old flame, Sheila. She was sitting on his lap, and they were passionately entangled. Someone had asked him, "How does it feel to be marrying Linda tomorrow?" "Let's not bring up things that ruin the mood," he'd said with a laugh. "But didn't you chase her for a long time?" they'd continued. "Once you have her, it's not that exciting. I'm a bit over it. But she wants to get married, so whatever." Later, Merlin had even taken Sheila to a hotel next door. The moment I saw the video someone sent me, all my anticipation and happiness turned to anguish, swallowing me whole. I trembled, feeling sick to my core, retching until I was drained and nearly fainted. But I didn't confront Merlin. At dawn, I still got up, put on my wedding dress, let the makeup artist doll me up, and made my way to the wedding looking my best. I wanted to stand in front of everyone and humiliate him. "So, did you have fun with Sheila last night?" I asked him. His face turned ashen. "I can explain last night, but can we at least finish the wedding first?" "No, we can't," I replied, meeting his gaze firmly. "We're done, Merlin. As of today, I have nothing to do with you." Merlin's face darkened further, and he gripped my hand tightly. "With a spectacle like this, do you think anyone will dare to marry you now?" I looked at him, seeing no love or joy in his eyes, only anger at his own humiliation. He wanted to go through with the wedding, not because he loved me, but to save face. I yanked my hand away. Well, what if I throw myself at someone else? My gaze drifted to the audience, landing on Norton, Merlin's lifelong enemy. When I slipped the ring onto Norton's hand, I was even more nervous than I'd been when I refused Merlin. My best friend Tess had once mentioned Norton in passing. Apparently, he wasn't interested in women and had dated men instead. I figured asking for his help was the best choice. Before he had a chance to react, I said, "I know you're not into women, but please, help me. Get me out of here." Norton stared at me for a long moment. Just when I thought he might turn me away, he asked abruptly, "You sure you won't regret it?" I thought he was asking about the broken engagement, so I shook my head firmly. "No regrets." "You said it," he replied, immediately taking my hand and leading me away with steady steps. His strong frame radiated reassurance. Behind us, Merlin shouted, "Norton, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Norton didn't even look back. "Handle it." "Yes, sir," his assistant replied, stepping forward. I got into Norton's car, my wedding dress filling up nearly the entire back seat. Away from the bustling crowd, sorrow crept over me. It wasn't Merlin I missed, it was the 5 years I'd devoted to him. I believed we'd have a happy ending, but all I'd gotten was this embarrassment. Tears started to fall uncontrollably. At that moment, the divider in the car went up, and Norton handed me a tissue. He didn't say anything to comfort me, only murmuring, "Welcome to reality." I cried harder. Once I'd cried myself out, I asked Norton to join me for a drink. He took me to his private wine cellar, where he simply kept me company in silence. At one point, Tess called me. I was already tipsy, so I put her on speaker. "You brat. You ran off with Norton in the middle of your wedding?" Tess laughed. "Finally, you've got someone good. Since you've already dragged him off, might as well make him yours tonight too. I bet Norton's quite the catch." I hiccuped, quickly ending the call. "Sorry, Norton, my friend was just talking nonsense," I said, wobbling to my feet. "Thank you for tonight. I should head back now." But I had overestimated my tolerance. As soon as I stood, I stumbled and fell right into Norton's arms. I'm not sure how things escalated from there. Norton kissed me suddenly, with an intensity that left me defenseless. My wedding dress ended up in shreds. I used what little strength I had left to push him away, finally catching my breath. He gazed at me, eyes full of possessiveness. "After putting a ring on my finger in front of everyone, are you regretting it now? Or are you still thinking about Merlin?" Even though I was dizzy, I shook my head instinctively. Merlin had died in my heart the night he'd slept with his old flame. "That's good," Norton said. My wedding dress fell away completely. "Wait." "No waiting." Norton wasn't the waiting type. He lifted me up effortlessly, and I clung to him as he moved toward me. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. I felt like a boat tossed by waves, drifting and surging. The rhythm became faster, pulling me along and thrashing me about, until I found myself at the crest of the waves. My toes curled, and I bit down on Norton's shoulder as the final wave crashed over us. The storm didn't subside for a long time. I almost lost consciousness. Norton let out a low hum, placing a kiss on my forehead, murmuring words I barely understood. It sounded like, "Linda, I've waited for this day a long time." But I wasn't sure. In that moment, between the soft fabric and the wine's fragrance, I felt like I was lost in a wild, dreamy haze. But soon, Norton's actions proved it wasn't a dream. All night, I was barely able to catch my breath. The next morning, I woke up sore all over. My phone was filled with missed calls and messages from Merlin. I didn't want to look at a single one. Norton had already left for work, but he'd thoughtfully arranged fresh clothes and breakfast for me. He even assigned a personal attendant to cater to my needs. But I didn't need any of it. After a failed relationship, I wasn't about to linger, nor did I intend to get entangled with Norton. I sent a message to my family to let them know I was safe, then headed straight from Norton's estate to the airport. Without a specific destination, I simply booked the next available flight. Right before boarding, I thought about it and decided to send Norton a message. "Thank you." Then I removed my domestic SIM card. And just like that, I spent over 2 months living abroad on my own. It wasn't until Tess's birthday was approaching that I finally booked a flight home. Tess organized an outdoor birthday party. Initially, only a few of us close friends showed up. To our surprise, Merlin showed up with his white moonlight, the one he could never get over. Tess was furious. "I didn't invite him. How shameless. I'm kicking him out." I stopped her. "It's okay, today's your birthday. No need to get upset over this. Just ignore him." But after a few drinks, a commotion suddenly broke out where Merlin was sitting. Staggering, he made his way over to me. "Linda, enough playing around. Come home with me." I stepped back, looking at him coolly. "Maybe you forgot, Merlin, we already broke up." "But I didn't agree to that," he said, staring at me. "So you're still my fiancé." A round of applause broke out behind him. Norton walked over. "First time I've heard you need the other person's permission to break up." Merlin's face darkened. "Norton, why do you keep meddling in things between me and Linda?" "What I do is none of your business," Norton replied, stepping closer and positioning himself between us. The heavy smell of alcohol vanished, replaced by a refreshing pine scent. "Ready to go?" he asked me. Without hesitation, I said, "Let's go." Behind us, one of Merlin's friends muttered, "Looks like Linda really doesn't like you anymore. Maybe she's with Norton now." Merlin said, "Impossible. Norton's not even into women. Linda's just trying to annoy me." The more she acts up, the more it shows she cares about me. Just wait. I have plenty of ways to make her come back obediently. I ignored Merlin's nonsense. But because of his scene, I didn't get to eat much. Noticing that Norton had no intention of leaving, I thought about it and politely asked. I'm going to get some food. Care to join me, Norton? Which led to the two of us sitting at a street-side food stall. The lively chatter and rising smoke from the grill clashed starkly with Norton's expensive suit. But he sat there with ease, placing his designer suit on the cheap plastic stool without a hint of discomfort. When the barbecue arrived, I said, if you don't feel like eating, don't force yourself. Norton glanced at me and picked up a skewer, eating it. Not bad at all. I remembered the times when I was with Merlin. Whenever I got tired of fancy restaurants and wanted to try something different, he'd always complain that street food was unsanitary. Linda, we have money. We don't need to eat that stuff. To me, street food had nothing to do with wealth or status. One year, on my birthday, he reluctantly agreed to go with me to a food stall. But the whole time, he sat there with a deeply furrowed brow, wiping the seat multiple times before he'd even sit down. Watching him struggle to eat, I said, if you really don't want to, just don't eat. I'll eat by myself. No worries, he said, if I said I'd join you, I'll eat with you. The next day, he ended up with food poisoning. As I took care of him, my eyes brimmed with guilt. Merlin didn't hold back either, constantly making remarks to blame me. I told you it was dirty, but you insisted on going. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in this state. Hopefully you'll learn your lesson and stop being so reckless. In that moment, my guilt reached its peak. From then on, I let him dictate my diet. I snapped back to the present. Most of the barbecue was gone. Seeing Norton reach for the last skewer, I quickly grabbed it from him and stuffed it in my mouth. If you ate that much, you're paying, I said. He replied easily, you slept with me, and ran off. Treating me to some barbecue isn't too much to ask. I was so shocked I started choking and coughed uncontrollably. Norton calmly handed me a bottle of water, his eyes full of teasing amusement. But the next day, Norton's assistant informed me that Norton's stomach issues had flared up, and he was in the hospital. Remembering Merlin's constant blaming, the first thing I did upon entering Norton's hospital room was apologize. I'm sorry. Norton, with an M4 in his hand, looked at me from the hospital bed. Why are you apologizing? I was the one eating, it had nothing to do with you. I'm an adult. I know what I'm doing and the consequences it might bring. He looked at me, a hint of helplessness in his eyes. I didn't want to ruin your fun. But I guess it backfired. If anyone should apologize, it's me. I was momentarily stunned. Thinking back to Merlin's words of reproach. Right. He was an adult too, fully aware that his harsh words would only make me feel worse. Yet he said them anyway, because he wanted to punish me, to make me fall in line. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was Owen, Merlin's best friend, who was fairly close to me too. Linda, Merlin's got a fever, and he's out of medicine. Could you bring some over and check on him? There was an echo in his voice, he must have put me on speaker. Merlin was probably listening. I said, tell the girl who was on top of him the night before our engagement to get him some. And by the way, Merlin and I are over. Didn't you know? So, stop asking me to take care of his issues. The sound of a teacup smashing came through the line. Merlin's voice, seething with anger, followed, Linda, my patience has limits. Take the hint and don't push it. I gave a cold laugh, just about to respond. Norton suddenly called to me, Linda, the 4 is finished. Can you call the doctor? I was a bit puzzled, his assistant was right beside him, and the call button was by the bed. Why ask me? The answer came a second later when Merlin exploded on the other end of the phone. Linda. You'd rather take care of Norton than come check on me? Ah. So he wanted to provoke Merlin. Playing along, I replied, yes, is there a problem? Merlin became even angrier. Don't think I can't live without you. I could find countless girls like you. Fed up with his nonsense, I hung up the phone. Meanwhile, Owen stared at the phone, now disconnected, feeling caught in the middle. Merlin, if you really want to win Linda back, you should try being a bit softer. The more you act like this, the less she'll want to come back. Besides, Owen swallowed, you were in the wrong here. You were about to get married and still went with Sheila. Merlin's expression darkened. I was drunk that night, and Sheila was so forward. What could I do? Besides, it only happened once. So what? Who could resist their first love in that situation? I just made the same mistake every man makes. I still love Linda. Isn't that enough? What more does she want, for me to beg on my knees? Owen sighed in resignation. Look, Merlin, I'm telling you now. If Linda ever truly leaves you, don't come crying to me. Merlin's gaze hardened. Leave? With who? Norton? He's no better. You think he likes Linda? He's only using her as a substitute. Though Norton didn't blame me, I still visited him frequently in the hospital these past few days. As I was carefully peeling an apple for him, Tess called. Did you get back together with Merlin? I was confused. What? She sent me a picture, Merlin holding a girl in his arms, kissing her. The girl's face was half hidden. But even with only half her face visible, her style and appearance looked so similar to mine that I was momentarily taken aback, almost thinking it was me. Tess also sent screenshots of the comments below. Did you and Linda get back together? Guess you won the bet. Linda really came running back to you. Just goes to show Linda can't live without you. And Merlin had added his own vague comment, she'll only ever be mine. Without clarifying that it wasn't me in the picture, letting everyone believe otherwise on purpose. This woman isn't me. I replied to Tess, Merlin did this on purpose. He wants everyone to think that woman is me. Tess breathed a sigh of relief over the phone. That's good, I thought you'd made up with that jerk. I need to confess something. While you were traveling abroad, Norton came to me, asking for your whereabouts. He offered me a lot, so I told him where you were. But don't worry, that was just for Norton. If it were anyone else, no matter how much they offered, I wouldn't have said a word. Each time you moved to a new place, Norton would fly out to see you. Did you never run into him while you were abroad? I paused for a moment. I really hadn't seen Norton or had any idea about this. I looked up at him. He was standing quite close to me now. Tess was loud enough on the phone that Norton could hear every word she said clearly. I quickly told Tess we'd talk in person, then hung up. I did go see you, Norton explained, looking at me. But I didn't want to disturb you. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. In that moment, I felt a slight sting in my nose. It would be a lie to say I'd never felt lonely or scared while traveling alone in a foreign country. But now, knowing that someone had been there, keeping me company each time I arrived in a new place, it felt like the one gap in my journey had suddenly been filled. My heart, which had settled into a quiet rhythm, suddenly began to beat faster. One beat after another. Later, I talked to Merlin and asked him to explain clearly in the future that the person in his photos wasn't me. But Merlin said, first, I never said it was you. They guessed on their own, I can't control what they think. Second, I don't have the time to explain to everyone. And anyway, it's my freedom to decide if I explain or not. I narrowed my eyes. Merlin, don't push it. He said, Linda, just come back to me. That'll solve everything. I told you, we're already over. But you still keep checking my social media, don't you? Isn't that because you still care about me? I just found him ridiculous. What exactly do you want? The day after tomorrow, Merlin said, come celebrate my birthday with me. We'll talk in person. Merlin loves crowds. Every year for his birthday, he invites tons of people. The private room was packed when I opened the door. Everyone was crowded around Merlin, chatting. Linda really wants to get back together with you, just look at that expensive gift. Of course. Women always come crawling back to him. Merlin was turning his wrist, showing off a brand new watch. I figured that was the gift I supposedly sent him. But in reality, I hadn't given him anything. He said, after all we'd been through, of course she still loves me. So, that was why he'd asked me to come today. To make me publicly confirm this lie. Well, I'd come to put an end to it today anyway. One of his friends spotted me and happily waved. You're here. Let's make room for her. No need, I replied. I'll just stand here for a bit before I leave. Merlin's face darkened for a moment. Linda, come sit. I didn't move, staying where I was as I spoke to him. Since we have so many people here, let me set things straight once and for all. Merlin and I are officially done. I already posted a video in our group chat explaining why. Feel free to watch it. The group chat had initially been just me, Merlin, and a few close friends, but more people had joined over time, and now there were hundreds. The video I'd posted showed Merlin sharing a passionate kiss with his one true love. After all, we had been together once. I hadn't wanted our relationship to end on such a messy note. But he'd kept pushing, so I had no reason to hold back. And by the way, to everyone here, don't ever try to link me and Merlin together again, or don't blame me if I cut ties with you. Everyone exchanged glances. But someone still couldn't resist speaking up. Oh, stop pretending. Weren't you just in Merlin's arms a few days ago, looking all weak-kneed? I picked up a glass of wine from the table and walked toward him. I poured the full glass over his head. What, you enjoy sticking your neck out? You. I didn't let him finish, grabbing a handful of peanuts and shoving them into his mouth. The person in Merlin's photos isn't me. If you're so curious, ask him who it is. Anyone else have questions? The room fell silent. The only sound was him spitting out the peanuts, with a few muttered two sounds. With my goal achieved, I turned and left the room. Merlin chased after me. He grabbed my wrist and shoved me against the wall, pinning me in place with his whole body. I couldn't move. So eager to go find someone else, Norton? I stared at him coldly. If you know that, then let go. He let out a small laugh. You actually think you can end up with Norton? Look at this. He pulled out a photo from Norton's wallet. They all say this is Norton's first love. Doesn't she look a lot like you? You think he's letting you get close because he actually cares? You're just a stand-in. Linda, he said, touching my cheek, why can't you see that I'm the only one who genuinely loves you? I did all this just to get you back. I walked down the stairs in silence. When I looked up, I saw Norton. He was standing straight by his car, and when he saw me, he immediately stubbed out his cigarette. For a moment, I hesitated to approach him. Seeing me freeze, he walked toward me instead. As he got closer, I took a step back. His voice was a bit hoarse. No matter what's happened, let me take you home. It's late, and it's not safe for you to be alone. We drove in silence. He insisted on walking me to my door, and just as he was about to leave, I called out to him. Norton, I said, holding onto his shirt, the photo in your wallet. The air felt heavy for a moment. A flash of panic crossed Norton's face. The photo in his wallet was of a cyberpunk-styled girl, the lead singer of a band, with braided hair, smoky eye makeup, and bold, asymmetrical earrings. She did look a lot like me. But those who know me well would never mistake her for me. They'd just say she resembles me. Merlin included. Because, from childhood to now, I'd always been the quiet girl, the model student. School uniforms and white dresses were my standard look. Teachers, relatives, even my parents said I was well-behaved, obedient. To everyone, I'd never seemed rebellious, like a train never off its track. It would be hard for anyone to associate me with the girl in that photo. But in fact, that girl was me. So, no, I wasn't anyone's stand-in. That was me in high school. When the academic pressure became unbearable, I'd secretly joined a band under the excuse of going to extra classes. Our band would often travel to nearby cities to perform. I knew no one would approve, so I never told anyone. But it was truly the happiest time of my life. Of course, I'd gathered a small following. There was one fan who attended every single one of our shows from the time I joined. After each performance, he'd send me a handwritten letter along with photos he'd taken of me. But I never knew who he was. After the band broke up, we lost touch. He was a unique note in my rebellious melody, never brought up but always remembered. Until I saw that photo. I recognized it instantly as one of the photos that fan had taken of me. Merlin didn't know the girl was me. He initially thought this photo would make me hate Norton. But it had the opposite effect, leading to an unexpected gain. Why didn't you tell me it was you? Norton said. There were so many fans who liked you back then, I felt insignificant among them. That's not true, I said, my nose tinged with a hint of bitterness. At first, so many people criticized me, saying I sang badly. You were the only one who praised me from beginning to end. Every time I got criticized, I would see your letters and think, at least there's you listening, it wasn't all that bad. When I saw Merlin pull out that photo, I felt even more certain about my feelings for Norton. My ears burned, and I reached out to wrap my arms around his neck, tentatively but deliberately kissing his lips. Norton, thank you for always being there for me. In the next moment, Norton took control, pinning my wrists above my head and kissing me fiercely. The small sofa became a battleground. Clothes were scattered everywhere. His heated body completely enveloped me, repeatedly calling my name, Linda. The waves of passion surged and ebbed. A huge fish dove into the water, swimming slowly and teasingly for a long time. He was doing it on purpose. I bit my lip and grabbed his arm. Norton. He looked at me, a mischievous smile on his lips. What are you thinking? Just say it. With a flushed face, I leaned in close to his ear and whispered 3 words. Norton let out a low grunt, veins popping on his forehead. Linda, you're going to regret this. That night, when he picked me up directly from the sofa, I knew I had gone too far. On Valentine's Day, the bar was filled with lovey-dovey couples. Merlin wore a dark expression, drinking silently. He couldn't understand why Linda hadn't returned to him after finding out she was a substitute. At first, when he found that photo in Norton's wallet, he thought it was Linda. But he knew it wasn't. Linda had always been the good girl, there was no way she would join a band. He thought, if he could find a substitute for Linda, maybe Norton saw her as someone else's substitute too. So he told her about it, waiting for her to come back to him. On the first day, he was full of hope, waiting for Linda's call. But it never came. After a week, he realized he hadn't even made it off Linda's blacklist. He thought of forcing her to come back, so during this time, he intentionally dated various girls, flaunting their affection. Just to make her jealous. But now, a month had passed, and there was still no response from Linda. He had no idea what had gone wrong. Owen urged him, why not just call her and ask? Who the hell wants to make that call? Merlin insisted, too proud. I cared about her, and Norton's a jerk. You want me to call her and beg her to come back? If she doesn't want to come back, fine. When she realizes she's been tricked, she'll have something to cry about. But the next moment, he took out his phone and called Linda. Forget it. Considering how much she loved me before, I'll give her one last chance. When the call came, I had just returned from the hospital with Norton. My mind was still in a fog. The doctor's words echoed in my ears. How could you be so careless when you've been pregnant for a month? Thank goodness the baby is fine. But you have to be especially careful for the first 3 months, or you'll regret it later. I was pregnant. Coming back to my senses, I vented my frustration by hitting Norton's arm. It's all your fault. Norton, despite his happiness shining through his eyes, replied, yeah, it's all my fault. But when we got home, I was hit with nausea again, my face pale with discomfort. Norton was also feeling unwell, but other than being there for me, he couldn't do much. Just when he was getting anxious, Merlin called. Linda, it's not too late to come back. I can break up with her. He thought I would be jealous over his recent high-profile romance with a pure college girl. For some reason, hearing his voice made me feel even more nauseous. Before I could respond, my phone was snatched away. Norton, soothing my back, said. Linda's pregnant, I'm warning you not to bother her. Merlin froze on the other end of the line. After a moment, he kicked over a bottle on the table. You dare steal my woman. But the call had already disconnected, and by the time he called back, he had been blocked. Owen, startled, asked what happened. Merlin, with a vacant look, said, last night, Norton answered Linda's call, and he said Linda is pregnant. He must be lying, right? Owen hesitated to respond. Because he thought it was true. No, Merlin shook his head. It must be fake. Linda knows she's a substitute, with her pride, how could she be with Norton? She must still be deceiving me. She's doing this because she's unhappy with my recent actions. I should have listened to you. Yes, I should talk to her properly. I'll buy her a gift to win her back. To make it easier to care for me, Norton suggested I move in with him. I thought about it and found the suggestion reasonable, so I planned to go home today to get some clothes. When I got home, I saw Merlin holding a gift box, standing at my door with flowers. "Linda, I'm sorry," he said as soon as he saw me. "I was too reckless and excessive recently. But whatever I did, it was because I love you. Can you forgive me?" "Look," he handed me the gift box, "this is the diamond pendant you've wanted for so long. I bought it for you. This necklace was what I initially wanted to wear on my wedding day with my wedding dress. A month before the wedding, when trying on the dress, I mentioned wanting to buy that pendant. He had promised me back then. But 3 days before the wedding, when I asked where the pendant was, Merlin said, 'I've been so busy that I forgot about it.' You have plenty of necklaces, can't you just wear another one?" I understood he was busy and didn't make a fuss about it. Looking back now, perhaps that pendant was a reminder. A reminder that he wasn't the right match for me. I smiled sarcastically, "What do I need it for now? If there's nothing else, you can leave." "Linda," he said with a crazed intensity in his eyes, "I know the thing that's been bothering you is that I slept with Sheila the night before the wedding, right? If she hadn't seduced me, it wouldn't have happened. How about I have her apologize to you?" He dragged a silenced Sheila out from a side passage, grabbing her hair and slamming her head against the wall. Bang, 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 several dull thuds echoed. "Will this make you feel better, Linda? Can you forgive me?" In that moment, Merlin seemed like a madman. I didn't dare make a move. While he wasn't paying attention, I texted the police and contacted Gus. Seeing me silent, Merlin suddenly slapped his own face twice. "I'm at fault too, I shouldn't have betrayed you. I'm sorry, Linda. Can you forgive me? Linda, come back to me." He stepped toward me. Instinctively, I covered my stomach and took a step back. That movement provoked him. He suddenly fixed his gaze on my belly. "Are you really pregnant with Norton's child? Didn't I tell you? He's just using you as a substitute. Why would you rather be someone else's substitute than reconcile with me?" He grew more agitated, his voice triggering the motion sensor lights. "But it's okay," he suddenly laughed, "we don't need this child, we'll have our own." I wanted to run. But his movements were even quicker. He locked my shoulders and pinned me against the wall. I couldn't move. "Don't move, just hold on a little longer. It won't hurt for long." He tightened his fist and swung it toward my stomach. At that moment, neither the police nor Norton could come to my rescue immediately. Despair washed over me, and I closed my eyes. There was a dull bang as something hit. The pain I anticipated never came. I opened my eyes to see Merlin with blood running down his forehead, his body gradually collapsing to the ground. Behind him was Sheila, wielding a fire extinguisher and hitting him. While Merlin was talking to me, Sheila had been trying to free herself from the ropes binding her. As Merlin's fist came toward my stomach, she finally broke free and picked up the fire extinguisher to help me. "Thank you," I said, almost exhausted, mustering the last of my strength to express my gratitude. "I owe you," Sheila said, placing the fire extinguisher aside and leaning against the wall to wait for the police. My nerves were still on edge. Then Norton appeared. At that moment, I didn't mean to cry, but tears started flowing without warning. Norton held me tightly in his arms. "It's okay, it's okay. I'm sorry, Linda, I came late." Merlin was taken away by the police and sentenced to prison. As for Sheila, Norton asked me how I wanted to handle her. I couldn't forgive her for what she had done in the past. But she did save me. "I don't want to owe her anything," I said. So Norton found Sheila and gave her $500,000. She accepted it gladly. Norton threw me a grand wedding. He handled almost everything in the lead up to the wedding. I just had to stay home and say yes or no. Later, I asked Norton why there were rumors at first that he liked men. Norton replied, "Too many people were curious about my romantic life, so the news was all mixed up." I never clarified anything, so naturally, they took it seriously. "But," he kissed my lips, "do you know which rumor I liked the most?" "What?" "They said the picture in my wallet was of my first love. You weren't back then, but now you are. Not a rumor, but truly his Linda. From then on, he would love her with all his might. And,